After the pigs had gone, I had surveyed the terrain to my satisfaction. I climbed down and continued walking. I wanted to be away from the area before dawn, since I feared that if I stayed, I might run into the wild pigs again. I walked all night and continued during the day. At the beginning of the night, I saw owls coming from their hiding places, revolving their eyes and stretching to become familiar with their surroundings and getting ready for the night. I was walking very fast, but very quietly, until I accidentally stepped on the tail of a snake. It started hissing and scuttling toward me. I ran as fast as I could for a long time. When I was 6, my grandfather had inserted a medicine into my skin that protected me from snake bite and enabled me to control snakes. But as soon as I started school, I began to doubt the power of that medicine. After that, I was no longer able to make snakes stop in their tracks until I went by. When I was very little, my father used to say, "If you are alive, there is hope for a better day, and then something good to happen. If there is nothing good left in the destiny of a person, he or she will die." I thought about these words during my journey, and they kept me moving, even when I didn't know where I was going. Those words became the vehicle that drove my spirit forward and made it stay alive. I had spent more than a month in the forest when I finally ran into people again. The only living things I had met were monkeys, snakes, wild pigs, and deer, none of which I could have a conversation with. Sometimes I watched the little monkeys practicing jumping from tree to tree, or watched the curious eyes of a deer that sensed my presence. The sounds of branches snapping off trees became my music. There were certain days when the sounds of the branches breaking made a consistent rhythm that I would enjoy very much, and the sonority of it would echo for a while and would gradually fade into the depths of the forest. As I was walking slowly, staggering from hunger, back pain, and fatigue, when I ran into some young people my age at an intersection where two paths merged into one. I was wearing a pair of trousers I had recently found hanging on a pole in an abandoned village. They were extremely big for me, so I had tied them with ropes so they wouldn't fall off while I walked. We all arrived at the junction at the same time, and upon seeing each other, we became paralyzed with fear. As I stood there, unable to run, I recognized a few of the faces, and I smiled to break the tension and uncertainty. There were 6 boys, and 3 of them, ALWG, Musa, and Kane, had attended Centennial Secondary School with me in Matrujong. They weren't close friends, but the 4 of us had been flogged once for talking back to the senior prefect. We had nodded at one another after that punishment, which we all agreed was unnecessary. I shook hands with the boys. I could tell who was from what tribe by the marks on their cheeks and their features. ALWG and Saidu were Temne, Kane, Juma, Musa, and Wariba were Mende. They told me they were heading for a village called Yele in the Bonte district that they had heard was safe because it was occupied by the Sierra Leone Armed Forces, the government. Quietly, I followed them as I tried to remember all of their names, especially the names of the faces I recognized among them. I walked in the back, creating a little distance between us. I began to realize how uncomfortable I felt being around people. Kane, who was older, perhaps 16, asked me where I had been. I smiled without answering. He tapped me on the shoulder as if he knew what I had experienced. "Circumstances will change, and things will be fine. Just hold on a little more," he said, tapping my shoulder again and nodding. I responded with a smile. Once again, I was with a group of boys. This time, there were 7 of us. I knew this was going to be a problem, but I didn't want to be by myself anymore. Our innocence had been replaced by fear, and we had become monsters. There was nothing we could do about it. Sometimes we ran after people shouting that we were not what they thought, but this made them more scared. We hoped to ask people for directions. It was impossible. We had traveled for more than 6 days when we came in contact with a very old man who could barely walk. He sat on the veranda of a house in the middle of the village. His face was too wrinkled to be still alive, yet his dark skin was shiny and he spoke slowly, gobbling the words in his jaws before he let them out. As he spoke, the veins on his forehead became visible through his skin. Everyone ran when they heard of the 7 boys on their way to the village here. I couldn't run at all, so they left me behind. No one was willing to carry me, and I didn't want to be a burden, he said. We explained to him where we were from and where we wanted to go. He asked us to stay for a while and keep him company. "You young fellas must be hungry. There are some yams in that hut over there. Can you boys cook some for me and yourselves?" he politely asked. When we almost finished eating the yams, he said slowly, "My children, this country has lost its good heart. People don't trust each other anymore. Years ago, you would have been heartily welcomed in this village. I hope that you boys can find safety before this untrustworthiness and fear cause someone to harm you." He drew a map on the ground with his walking stick. "This is how you get to Yele," he said. "What is your name?" Kanye asked the old man. He smiled as if he knew that one of us would ask this question. "There's no need to know my name. Just refer to me as the old man who got left behind when you get to the next village." He looked at all of our faces and spoke softly, with no sadness in his voice. "I will not be alive to see the end of this war. So to save a place in your memories for other things, I won't tell you my name. If you survive this war, just remember me as the old man you met. You boys should be on your way." He pointed his staff toward the path that lay ahead of us. As we walked away, he erased the map with his foot and waved us off with a raised right hand and a nod. Before the village disappeared from our sight, I turned around to take one last look at the old man. His head was down, and he had both hands on his staff. It was clear to me that he knew his days would soon be over, and he didn't bother to be afraid for himself, but he was for us. Someone had started a rumor about the 7 boys. Us. Many times during our journey, we were surrounded by muscular men with machetes who almost killed us before they realized that we were just children running away from the war. Sometimes I looked at the blades and the machetes and thought about how much it would hurt to be chopped with one. Other times I was so hungry and tired that I didn't care. At crowded villages, where we sometimes stopped to spend the night, the men stayed up to keep an eye on us. When we went to the river to wash our faces, mothers would grab their children and run home.